Retro.
Yeah.
Electro. Tech.
Oh yeah.
Hey, turn the lights back on. Wow. Retro Electro Tech. When real audio ruled the world.
Well, hello there once again, ladies and gentlemen. This is Retro Ernest of Retro Electrotech, and I'm going to start getting into the mechanical restoration of this Imperial Micromatic by Magnavox. So before I do the obligatory strip, dip, relubricate, adjust, all that stuff, I want to just demonstrate that this unit is basically working. So a moment ago, I powered it on. The motor's turning. It's doing okay. The mechanism, however, that cycles the tone arm was a bit jammed up, so I did a few things and liberated it good enough for this demonstration carefully. You don't want to try to unjam stuff and end up bending something, but anyways, I freed it up is the point. Now it might jam up again when I demonstrate it, but I'll deal with that if that happens. Anyways, so I'll mention too that when I turn it on, you're going to notice the idler tire is pretty loud because it's as hard as a rock. I mentioned that previously. So when it engages the stepped spindle, yeah, it's pretty loud. So I'll just power it on. You can see what I'm talking about or hear what I'm talking about. So anyways, now before I engage the tone arm, so when you flick this knob here over to auto, it will engage the mechanism, lift the tone arm will swing over, and if there's a piece of vinyl there, it will tap the edge of it, size it up to see what size vinyl it's dealing with so it knows where to set down in regard to the lead-in groove. Okay, so I'm going to simulate that by just holding my fingers around the area where a 12-inch LP would be if it was sitting on the spindle here, ready to be dropped onto the platter. So let me go ahead and do that. Like I said, it might get hung up again, so we'll see. Okay, didn't get hung up that time. And you see the tone arm set down right about the area where we would expect it to. So that's pretty good. No doubt I'm going to have to perform some adjustments, especially when I get everything reassembled. So, after the obligatory, strip, dip, relubrication, all that. In other words, cleaning, lubrication, and adjustment is what I need to do here. So anyways, what else? Oh, there is a cartridge on board. I'm going to check the health of that cartridge. I'm going to ohm out the coils, and if it's good, I'm just going to leave it and try to source a stylus, a needle, and I'll check the tone arm wiring. If the tone arm wiring is good, I'm going to leave that as well. In other words, if it ain't broke, I ain't going to fix it. So there you go. So I'll show that as well when I check the health of the cartridge there. All right, so let me get these wheels off. All right. All right, I'm going to get this record dropping arm off of here. A couple of set screws. Okay. Kind of tight. Okay. Okay, and then I'm going to remove these 3 screws here so I can remove the rest of the record dropping arm assembly. Okay, so let me see how many screws I can drop into the mechanism today. Okay, and there's a spring in here that's gonna Alright. Alright, looking good. Let me reposition the camera. Okay, and then on the top you have this E-clip here. Just going to use a screwdriver to pry it off. There it is. Alright. And this washer here, this little shoulder washer. And then here's our assembly here. I don't know if I'm in frame, yeah, kind of, but it's alright. I'll put this clip back on just so I can keep all the parts together for the meanwhile. Alright. Okay, so I got the record dropping arm and assembly off of there. Let me go ahead and flip her over. So I'm going to desolder these wires from the muting switch here, and once I get those wires desoldered, of course, then I'll be able to remove the tone arm, get that out of the way, and then from there I'll drop the entire mechanism out. Okay, so let me go ahead and do that. Okay, let me get in here and desolder these wires here. All right. Okay, so I got the tone arm wiring desoldered from the output jack / muting switch. So let me get the tone arm off of here now. Okay. And when you're taking the tone arm off the base here, there's usually always an indentation from the set screw, so you know where to position the set screw on reassembly, so don't worry about that. So let me go ahead and get the tone arm wiring out of the hole here, and I will be right back. Okay, so as you can see, the tone arm is removed, obviously. So let me go ahead and drop the cartridge out of here. There's just a screw on the top. Okay. All right. Okay, so I'm going to ohm out the cartridge and see what there is to see. Let me make sure I'm in frame here. So this is our, let me get a little pointer thing. So this is our right side pin right here. This is our ground, and this is our left. Okay. So I'm just going to read from ground to right, ground to left. Let me clip on here. Okay, let me. Okay, and I have nothing on the right, and nothing on the left. So let me spin the camera around to the meter. All right, and keep an eye on the meter face there. So here's the right side again, nothing at all. And here's the left side, nothing at all. So let me grab a good cartridge and I'll give you an idea of what you should see. Okay, starting with the right side, let me clip onto the correct pin here. Okay, and I'm not straight onto the meter face, I understand that, but we're at right about 6.5, and I have it on times 100, so we should have about 650 ohms on each side. So we have 650 ohms on the right. We want it we want both sides to be in the ballpark. So let me clip on to the left now. Okay, and here's our left side. And yeah, we're right about the same, about 650 ohms, give or take. Okay, oops. So yeah, everything's looking good with this cartridge. That's what I'm trying to convey. The other one is just dead. So anyways, let me move on. Well, anyways, wishful thinking on the cartridge, but that's okay. I'll get that all squared away. I'll order another one and off to the races. But the tone arm wiring is looking really good, actually. Yeah, it's all intact. It looks good. So I'm going to run with that. Okay, I'm going to drop the mechanism. There's 3 screws around the spindle assembly there. Or hub. All right. Okay. Remove that little ground from the screw there. Alright, set these aside. Then the tone arm base here, 2 screws. Let me flip it over. Alright, and then it'll pretty much lift on out of here. You have to clear the edge of the motor there, the mounting plate, but other than that, after you do that, the mechanism just pretty much lifts right out, okay? Okay, so I'm getting the tone arm lift assembly off of here. There's this bracket here. I already have 1 screw off over here because this was the screw on this side that was holding this ground wire, this chassis ground in place that attaches to the muting switch over here. So I'm just removing this last screw over here on this side of the bracket, okay, and then this comes right off. And then we have the lift spindle here. You see me bringing it in and out. It has a, you see that? It has one of those E-clips on it, so I'm going to pop that off. Okay, there it is. All right, and that's off of there. Just one of these little E-clips, all right. And then that should just, yep, drop right out. Okay, and then otherwise, as far as this main cam goes, there's a washer and there's another E-clip that holds it in place. I forgot to mention, before I pulled out the tone arm lift assembly, I popped the clip off here because, and let me bring this back into view, because if I wouldn't have done that, this lever here that slides underneath, let me see if I'm in frame, it slides underneath this main cam. It would have got hung up in there a little bit, so in anticipation of that I had removed the clip and the washer just to kind of bring this up a little bit. Sometimes these main cams, they get kind of locked in place, you know, old grease and all that will harden up. It becomes more like adhesive, and sometimes you have to heat this area up to pull this off. But anyways, this one came off easy. But I did that in anticipation of just needing this to lift a little bit to get this this base out of here, this lift assembly base. So I forgot to mention that because I'm so used to moving quick and all that, and working around the camera for me is not real fun. Some people, I think, don't mind it, but I do. I don't like stuff that gets in my way. But anyways, so there we are. The main cam is removed, and we're looking good. Everything's looking good here. Okay. Yep. All right. Okay, so what we're looking at here is the tone arm pivot assembly or swivel assembly. You know, different manufacturers have different names for stuff, but anyways, this pivot nut or swivel nut up here is what the actual tone arm mounts to. And you can see where the set screw left the indentation here. So when the tone arm is tightened down on this swivel nut or pivot nut, it's extending straight toward us, right, just straight on toward the camera. Just like this lever here. You see this lever's down here, this what's referred to as a tone arm positioning lever. Well, that's extending straight out toward the camera as well. So if the tone arm was mounted here, it would be running pretty much perfectly in line with the positioning lever here. And that's the whole point of this. Now, I'm not going to explain the entire mechanism because there's this other lever here that runs along the top side track of the main cam, and maybe I'll get into that at a later time, but primarily what I want to explain is the velocity trip mechanism for the most part, and how this tone arm pivot assembly plays into that. Okay, how it sort of shares in that process as far as making that happen and causing the cycle change to occur and all that. So just pay attention, make note of the tone arm positioning lever with this pin extending out the bottom, and the pivot nut that the tone arm attaches to, and the little indentation, and how they're in alignment with one another. Just keep that in mind. So that's the whole point of this, and I'm going to get into why that is. So let me go ahead and switch views. Okay, so before I continue on, I want to mention that I understand that the exposure is not going to be optimal because the reflection is causing the camera to want to underexpose, but anyways, I touched on just a moment ago the importance, of course, of the tone arm pivot assembly, and how the tone arm positioning lever here is instrumental in the whole velocity trip mechanism. And of course, we know that there's more than one thing going on, but our focus is on the velocity trip mechanism that in turn starts the change cycle, the auto cycle, tone arm lifting, returning, or tone arm setting down, whatever the case. So let me get into that. So let's start with that tone arm positioning lever here. Okay, so I just have this sitting here. I have one screw in the back. It's kind of rocking back and forth. It's a little bit loose, but I just don't want it to fall off, but it'll do the job. So with attention to the tone arm positioning lever and the levers I referred to a moment ago, or a little ways back, the striker feed lever here, this big lever, and then the smaller, very, very lightweight striker arm, okay? And they're important. So this whole link, if you will, is obviously instrumental in causing the change cycle to take place. So what's going on? Well, again, when the tone arm is positioned on the pivot or swivel nut here, and it's moving along, you see what's going on here. If I just move this back and forth, of course, this is activating or moving the pivoting the striker feed lever, and of course this striker arm. Okay, so we know that when the tone arm is tracking across a piece of vinyl, it's moving across very slow. So being that this positioning lever, or tone arm position lever, is following the tone arm, we know that this position lever is going to be moving very, very slow too, and just barely moving this striker feed lever along its range of travel. So Let me move it all the way back. So yeah, it's just going to move it across very, very slow. Very slow. And in turn, the striker arm is going to be moving very, very slow, inward, okay? Inward toward this housing here. Spindle housing, platter hub housing, whatever you want to refer to it as. So what's the significance in the slow movement of the striker feed lever and the striker arm? What's the significance of that? But first, what we're looking at here is the bottom side of the platter, of course. This is the platter hub, but there's this projection here. Let me rotate it around sideways. There's this projection jutting out, of course. So keep this in mind because this is going to be significant in just a moment as I continue the explanation. Now let's combine the 2 points that I was talking about, the striker feed lever and the striker arm here, tracking slowly and inward. So as long as these levers here, and this is all out of alignment because it's loose and all that, so just kind of trying to get it positioned correctly. So as long as these are moving slowly, then the auto cycle aspect of the mechanism is going to remain in what's referred to as an out of cycle state, okay? Because what's happening is that platter hub and the projection that sticks out of it, well, that hub and projection are spinning and around and around and around within this housing area. That projection is brushing against this striker arm here. It's just kind of brushing against it as it rotates. And the reason why it's able to brush against it and kind of sweep it out of the way during that portion when the tone arm is tracking across the vinyl slowly, and in return these levers are moving inward very slowly. It's able to do that because, well, they're moving slowly, okay? They don't have any velocity, any inward acceleration and ability to maintain a faster velocity and that inward direction. So, that word velocity once again. So they don't have that at that point, all right? But when do they? So when does the velocity trip mechanism trip? Well, when the tone arm gets to the lead out groove, the end of the vinyl, as most of us know, when it reaches that lead out groove, it gets sucked into the lead out groove rather quick. It happens, there's that sort of rapid acceleration inward, and while that happens, while the tone arm is getting pulled into the lead out groove, there's that acceleration, and for but a moment it's able to maintain that velocity, that higher rate of speed and that inward direction at the same time into this housing. So when it all of a sudden just kind of thrusts inward suddenly, then that's when that projection hits it dead on. The striker, the striker arm here just hits it dead on and causes the striker arm, because you'll notice that the striker arm, moves, it's not attached to the striker feed lever, okay? That wouldn't work. It needs to just kind of sit here on its own, under its own weight. This is why this area should be kept clean and smooth, no lubricants that, could potentially bog it down, gum it up, or whatever. This needs to just be clean, free of dirt, free of lubricant, because this lightweight striker arm just needs to move under its own weight, all right? And it needs to be independent of the striker feed lever. And the reason why, because when it is hit dead on by that projection, when there's that acceleration, when the tone arm reaches the lead out groove and gets sucked in, and then as a result this striker feed lever is sucked in kind of quick along with the striker arm, and the projection again hits this thing dead on, what happens is this this striker arm is pushed rearward. You see what's going on here? Let me get my hand out of the way. You see that? That's crucial because when that projection strikes the striker arm and, you know, pushes it rearward, then this drive lever here is activated, okay? This drive lever is activated, all right? And notice here on the drive lever, this pin sticking up here. Hopefully you can see that. There's this, you know, pin sticking up. I'll kind of angle it a little bit. And you can see this pin, hopefully. Well, this pin here sits underneath the main cam gear, and it's kind of locked in place by a tab underneath the main cam gear. It's kind of locked in place until the striker arm here is struck, moves rearward, pushes the pin out from that tab, and sort of unlocks that, you know, unlocks ultimately the main cam. It gets everything unlocked and ready to roll. And the way that happens, and I'm going to have to change views a little bit, so I'll be right back. Okay, so I didn't really change views so much. I just wanted to install this drive wheel here. So again, the striker arm moves rearward, activates this drive lever, unlocks that pin from its position under the main cam gear, and the significance in that is once that happens and it unlocks and moves rearward, you see what's happening here? Well, this drive wheel ultimately mates up with the motor spindle, the stepped spindle, the bottom step of that motor spindle, and causes this drive wheel to rotate. And can you see what's happening there when the drive wheel is rotating? You see the intermediate gear, all right? And then there's another pinion gear underneath and all that. When I disassemble things a little further, which I'm going to do after this, and start cleaning everything, well then, you'll see that pinion gear and all that. But ultimately, these gears cause the main cam gear to start its rotation. And when it starts rotating, well then that's when the change cycle begins, and the tone arm lifts from the lead out groove, carries back over to the rest position, or depending on how things are set up, we'll start over again and set down on the lead in groove and start playing the vinyl over again. So that's pretty much what's going on. That's how the trip action happens. And of course, there's other things going on at the same time, but I'm again referring to how this thing ultimately starts the auto cycling and whatnot. So if you want more information, it'll be a good idea to dig into the service manuals on these things and go through that whole process. It's good to arm yourself with this type of knowledge because that's how you're able to troubleshoot these mechanisms. When you know how they work, well, obviously you can troubleshoot them. But I'll just kind of leave it at that. I did notice on here there's a damaged couple teeth on here. So anyways, I'll address that when the time comes. I'll test it out and see what's happening. In fact, you'll recall that in the very beginning of this video, I demonstrated that this unit is basically working. The tone arm was actually cycling and all that. So anyways, I'll cross this bridge if I need to as far as these damaged teeth. So I'm going to continue on from here. Hopefully this explanation of at least this phase of the velocity trip mechanism clarifies some things. So let me go ahead and move on. Oh, by the way, one thing I forgot to mention is that the customer sent me a parts unit. I forgot about that. It just slipped my mind for a moment there. But anyways, I looked at the intermediate gear on it, and the teeth on it are intact all the way through. So I'm going to go ahead and swap out the intermediate gears when I start the reassembly, in other words. As a matter of fact, let me go ahead and zoom in on the teeth here, and maybe you guys will be able to see that detail. Hopefully you will. Let me zoom in. Yeah, so there it is right here. You see what I'm talking about right in here. Okay. So next time you see this intermediate gear when I install the new one, instead of a green one, it's going to be a red one. So, so there you go. Okay, so now for a little bit more disassembly so I can get these parts washed. The striker feed lever, the striker arm, the intermediate drive gear assembly and so forth, the spindle housing, and I'll talk a little bit more about these when I start getting ready to clean them, but real quick I'm just going to get the show on the road. There's, as far as, well actually I want to remove the striker arm first. So there's a couple of these E-clips or SUR clips, one here and one here, you know, at the pivot point here and pivot point here. So I'm going to just use a little screwdriver and just pop this off here, and when I do that I'll, you know, shield it so it doesn't fly across the shop, and that's fine there. So the striker arm, let me get the striker feed lever, pop that off, just put my hand here so again it doesn't go sailing across the shop. I'm just putting these in the tray that I'm going to, you know, do my thing in. All right, so there's that. Let me get all these parts, and then I'm going to remove the spindle housing here, or platter hub housing, whatever. So there's 4 screws inside, and there's some little indexing pins at the bottom of the housing so that you can situate it correctly upon reassembly. But just pay attention to the orientation of the spindle and all that stuff. Just pay attention to what you're doing so that when you reinstall everything, you know, everything will go back on without a lot of frustration. And as a matter of fact, I'll point that out when I start reassembly. So anyways, so I'm going to remove these screws. Okay, now I lifted the camera up a little bit. So anyways, on the underside, and actually you should do this first. It doesn't matter for me, but for some of you newer ones, yeah, do this first. At the bottom, you just remove, you can see this little catch, or you may be able to see this little hooked little portion of the spindle assembly there. So there's a spring on it that attaches to this post on the record dropping slide here. So just remove the spring. There you go. And then there's a cotter pin. I don't know if you can see that, but anyways, there's a cotter pin there. Just pull the cotter pin out. Now let me actually use a screwdriver. Cotter pin's pretty straight on this side, but yeah, anyways, that's better. So we get a little bitty screwdriver into the loop of the cotter pin and just pull it out. Good enough. And that's about it. So this thing will lift out now. Okay, I got I'm in frame. Got the 4 screws out on the top side. So there you go. And this is what I'm talking about. Just pay attention to, you know, the orientation of things. You know, when you pull out the you know, the spindle parts here, just pay attention to things, make note of it, snap photos, do whatever. But I'm not going to get into a big old how-to detail on that. But just pay attention and you'll be fine. But yeah, I'll clean all this stuff out, clean the hollow of the spindle out real good, and just make sure that nothing's going to get hung up. So let me set this off to the side over here into the moat, and there we go. Just make sure yeah, here's that little cotter pin. You drop that back in the hole here on the spindle where it belongs, just so I don't lose it. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do here is remove the remove this intermediate drive gear, the assembly, and then we should be looking pretty good at that point. Okay, and on the bottom side of that intermediate drive gear little assembly, there's a nut here, 1/4 inch, and another one of those E-clips right here, okay? So clip here, nut here. I'm going to go ahead and get that removed. Alright, I believe that, yeah, there we go. Let me get this clip off. Okay, just right here. Alright. Flip this back around. Now we'll go ahead and just lift it on out. On this model there's a little spring on the underside too. Just pay attention. It's just one of these little tension springs here that, you know, you just got to just be aware of where it goes, sketch it out or snap a photo of it or something. I forgot to mention that, so no big deal though. Just, again, just pay attention. And that's about it. Let me go ahead and remove our gear, get that in the bath. Get our pinion gear out of here as well. This little, you see it here, the pinion gear that I was talking about earlier. Yeah. Anyways, so there's another clip on the top there. Let me get that off. All right. And there's a spring here and a washer. You'll see all this when you're taking it apart. And as I keep saying, and I'm going to keep stressing, just pay attention where things go, and you'll be all right. Okay. So let me get everything in the bath, and that's about it. So you can see that I've got everything out of the way that I need out of the way. I'm not too worried about the drive lever and all that on this side here. I'm going to clean around it, and not a problem. I'm going to dunk this mechanism anyways and dry it off. Oh, the only thing that I forgot to remove here is the muting switch, because I want to clean the contacts on the muting switch and whatnot. So it's just one screw down the middle there. So these levers that are left under here, they're okay, not a problem. I'm going to clean them in place and apply the lubricant that I need to apply. I'll get into that when the time comes. Everything's ready for me here to clean really nicely. So I'm going to set this into the bath over here, get these parts out of the way and all that good stuff, and I'll be right back. Okay, so there you go. I got the parts in here that I need to clean up. Like I said, because they're not horribly bad, this thing didn't come in out of a basement, a wet basement. It's not all, the parts aren't all, calcified and a bunch of, rust and oxidation, all that kind of crap. Everything's actually pretty good. In fact, the parts are kind of oily. I think maybe the customer was, trying to lubricate some things and all that. So in a way, that's good because, the parts were kind of oily, and that helps things out a little bit as far as, getting everything cleaned up. Kind of breaks up any dirt anyways and crap that might be trying to cling onto the metal. And he pretty much just put a light coat of oil on there for me, so that's fine. And I'm going to clean it all off anyways and lubricate everything according to factory spec and all that. So great. But I am going to end this part here in the next video, and the next video is probably going to come pretty soon. I just got to wait to get, I've got the idler wheel packaged up. I'm going to send it off so I can get another idler wheel, and of course I need to get a cartridge and so forth. But while I'm waiting for that, I'm going to get all these parts cleaned up, and when I start reassembling the mechanism, I will roll footage on that as I go through and relubricate some of these areas and whatnot. I'll show some of that in the next video, and I'll get everything reassembled as far as the mechanism is concerned, and then I'll do some cleaning and touching up and lubricating of the whatchamacallit there, the underneath the chassis there, all the levers and whatnot. Guys, I'm really super tired. I was up, I woke up at 2 in the morning, couldn't get back to sleep, came into the shop about 5 because I had parts to order. I had a lot of parts to order actually for multiple units I'm working on and whatnot. So yeah, I came out here at 5, got that out of the way, and by the time I opened up the shop, I was ready to go on half a brain. So I'm half asleep. The other half of my brain that's awake is working through everything. But don't worry, customer, I'm not going to screw your equipment up because I'm working on half a brain. Even half a brain, I can do this. And of course, once I get some rest and I get all this reassembled, I will systems check everything, make sure it's purring like a kitten. But otherwise, guys, I'm going to end it here. I'm just going to get these parts all cleaned up. Since they're not bad, I'm just going to use some Dawn dishwashing liquid and warm water and a little brush, clean up everything real good, and then dry everything off real good. And again, start the relubrication process as I reassemble anything. So I'm just going to leave it at that. As I always say, guys, peace, love, music, and the vintage audio that brings it to your ears. Till next time, y'all take care. See you in the next video.
This has been a Spinning Head production.